Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kristen and these are my final thoughts for my July 2023 currently inked pens. This first fountain pen, Platinum 3776 Century with a soft fine nib, was inked up with Diamine Poinsettia. I was so happy with this pen and ink combination. It was just wonderfully wet. It was just a beautiful shade of red. I love it. It's deep, it's warm, it's wet. Not too wet, not too dry, coming out of this drier writing fountain pen nib. So this was a perfect pairing for me this month. It skipped once for the entire month. The entire time that I used it, anytime that I picked it up and used it and wrote with it, it only skipped one time. It was great to use. Next up was the TWSBI Diamond 580 AL with a medium nib. It was inked up with Ferris Wheel Press, the Velvet Ballet. This was surprisingly a pleasant experience whenever I picked up the fountain pen. Initially, it was underwhelming because I was so very impressed by Diamine Poinsettia as the red that I had been looking for. This kind of flew under the radar for me, but after using it more and more, I began to really enjoy this fountain pen ink. I don't know if you would be able to see, but there are some instances where there is heavy shimmer. So right here and even up here, when I first started the writing session, there was much more shimmer in some of these areas where I may have taken a break. And then when I picked up the pen again to write more, there was heavy shimmer. But going on down towards the end, it was really only present where the ink pooled. At first, it began to bother me, or at first it was a problem. But the more and more I wrote with it, it seemed the shimmer was an accessory. I don't even know how to explain it properly. My general expectation is to see shimmer consistently throughout my writing experience. This ink, there were some instances where there was no shimmer, and then every now and then it'll pop up just a little bit. So if I write the word will, those last two letters would most likely have a bit of shimmer. So in those instances, it was like a pleasant surprise. I think I really did enjoy the color of this red. It's actually a cool toned burgundy color, which I didn't think that I would appreciate in comparison to the warmth of Diamine Poinsettia, but I really did appreciate this ink on its own. So not really thinking about this is a red, this is a brown, this is a burgundy, this is a maroon, this is something else. It was pleasant to use. The flow was nice. The shimmer was nice whenever it showed up. It was okay whenever it didn't show up. It was just a nice surprise when it did. I emptied it before the end of the month because there were other pen and ink pairings that I enjoyed more, but this was still a really good pen and ink pairing for me. This is the Leonardo Momento Magico with an extra fine nib. I have emptied this pen of Teranishi Opera Rose because it wasn't as pleasant as I was hoping. I really do enjoy this pen, but because it's an extra fine nib, it has the potential to feel a bit unpleasant if you're not using a lubricating ink. And this was not one of those lubricating inks. Since this is also very close to being an orange ink, I really wanted more of a pinky color. Sometimes this ink looks pink, other times it looks orange or terracotta. I really do enjoy like those softer colors, but for some reason, this ink just doesn't sit well with me, at least in an extra fine nib. I want to try it again in maybe a sig nib or something that's a little bit broader than this extra fine. It performed very well. There was no drying out, no hard starts. There were no performance issues with the ink. It was just, I preferred writing with other pen and ink pairings. So I definitely uninked this one pretty quickly because no matter how much I wrote or how hard I tried, it just was not a pleasant experience for me. The TWSBI Eco with a medium nib was inked up with Diamine Celebration. After using this ink, I realized that the shade of orange that I enjoy using is more of a coral. So not something that's almost yellow, not something that's completely red, not something over here, even though Ancient Copper it's a really nice one. If I were to have something that's kind of in this family of colors, I prefer like a peachy coral color. So these two are so beautiful, such beautiful inks. So Diamine Celebration was the perfect ink, or should I call it the perfect gentleman. So it wasn't too wet. It wasn't too dry. It was just like, what do you need? I will take care of your needs kind of thing. I don't even know if this makes sense, but I enjoyed it. It was so nice. It was very pleasant to write with. There were moments where I worried that I would get some hard starts or some clogging, but there was nothing to worry about. It performed reliably every single time that I picked up this fountain pen to write. Surprisingly pleasant. I was not expecting to like it very much, but I really do. I've come to realize that there's a pattern in the shimmer inks that attract me, that are attractive to me. I do like Diamine Celebration, and it's partially because the shimmer is pretty close to the color of the ink. It is very close, almost the same color. So it has like maybe a champagne type shimmer, but it is so subtle. It is so very subtle that it doesn't bother me when I see it or when I don't see it. So it's more of like a nice little highlight, a nice little surprise. You may or may not be able to see it very well, just because the shimmer is pretty close to the same color as the ink. But I think that's what I liked about it. I really like the color. I really like the shimmer, and it performed reliably well. My only issue is this right here. I've resolved myself to saying that TWSBI pens for me are going to be those knockaround pens. I'm going to be pushing the limits on my TWSBIs. So if I have a shimmery ink or some other ink that I would not dare to put in my Visconti, or I would not dare to put in one of my lovely Italian pens, I will put it in a TWSBI and I will try it out. If I eventually encounter some issues with cracking of the section or issues with the piston or the fins on the feed, then I am okay with having to replace that. They're nice and reliable. Not too expensive, but I think they perform in a way that I really enjoy, and I like how they look as well. This part is frustrating. I have not removed the piston to go in there with like a little brush. What are those little things? Like little straw cleaner brushes or something, like pipe cleaner or something. I could go in and do that. I just have not done it just yet. But I did remove the nib and the feed to clean this area because it was really bad. That was my only complaint about this ink, is that that shimmer gets everywhere, and it is so very stubborn. So if you are not prepared to go in and really scrub to remove every bit of shimmer, and if you don't want that shimmer sticking around for the next ink filling, then you might want to say no thank you to Diamine Celebration. But I liked it. It was good. This is my Pilot Vanishing Point with a fine nib. It was inked up with Van Dieman's Sea Turtle, a very lovely deep cool toned green with a red shimmer. Now sometimes the sheen would show up, and other times it did not. The unfortunate part about this pen and ink pairing is that I don't think the Vanishing Point likes thicker, sheening inks. It's not that it doesn't perform well. It's just that the ink tends to dry out a little bit faster in a Vanishing Point, because I guess this little window here is not so completely airtight. But it wasn't too much of an issue for me. I actually preferred how the drier version of this ink performs and looks on paper. There's much more sheen to the first half of this writing than there is at the very end. So you'll see that the green of this ink, Sea Turtle, shows up much more prominently down here than it did up here. It's much more dark because of the red kind of toning down this green color. I didn't have too much of an issue with this ink drying out just a little bit in this fountain pen because I preferred how it looks up here. Diamine Bliss was inked up in my LAMY 2000 with an extra fine nib. This was a very nice and refreshing combination. I had no complaints. So it wasn't dry. It wasn't wet, and because of the feedback on this nib, it was a very pleasant experience. One very interesting, very nice surprise is that this is a quick drying ink. It was very nice to write with on Tomoe River paper. So by the time I finished down here what I was writing and I capped the pen and removed the clip, the ink was completely dry. This was a win. If you want a quick drying ink that doesn't look boring, a quick drying ink that's nice and colorful and bright and cheery, then Diamine Bliss is a great choice. Now with Colorverse, Iris Nebula. I don't know how many times I can say that I love this ink. This shimmery ink is just so pleasant. It is such a joy to write with this pen and ink pairing. I'm kind of getting tired of myself saying how much I enjoy this ink. Is there an ink that you enjoy so much that you get tired of saying how much you enjoy it? I seem to be on my way to feeling like that about this ink. It is just so great. It's so nice. I love the purplish color. I love the pearlescent shimmer in here, and I just love how it feels coming out of this nib. One day I do want to try it in like a specialty or a custom grind nib, but right now in a medium TWSBI Eco nib, it's perfect. I'm going to give this ink a break for the month of August, but in the month of September, I want to try these two inks side by side just to see, because they are both so lovely. I love it. I love it. I love it. I know that I already have a full bottle of this ink right now, but I recently received a sample of Dominant Industry Matin, and I want to see, because they are pretty close, I would like to see if I prefer like the deeper color or a lighter, a little bit more purple and chromal shading color. But these both are so beautiful, and this was just, it was a hit. Coming out of this pen, it was not too dark, not too light. I love the softness of this color. I love the shimmer. Just like with Diamine Celebration, this has a pretty subtle shimmer. I enjoyed it. No complaints here. This is the SCHON Design Pocket 6 with a number 6 size perspective nib. This one was inked up with Van Dieman's Royal Starfish, and it was a beautiful pen and ink pairing. I love how wet and lubricating this ink is. It did not... I still had it linked. I still got it inked up. Okay. So yeah, I like it so much that I did not clean this one out just yet. So this pairing was great. This green sheen, though it matches so very well, was barely noticeable in my writing. The sheen, this green sheen, really only served to make this ink look like it had some shading properties. So wherever there was extra ink pooling, there was a hint or a suggestion of green sheen that kind of darkened the ink. So you would get this beautiful cool tone purple that shades darker to and almost black where the sheen presented itself. I love this perspective nib. I have not taken advantage of the multiple angles, but I love the feedback that this pen gives, and I love the architect personality to this nib grind. And I also appreciate the fact that I can use this as an extra fine when I'm using it in reverse. This is pretty cool. I love that I have cool tone purple inks that I can use in this fountain pen. Usually I would gravitate more towards the warmer purples, but with this pen, it needs like a blue purple. I just love having the punchier, the more bold colored inks in here. I've had softer colors like Sailor Ink Studio 280, and it was an enjoyable experience, but I seem to enjoy this so much more when I have a deeper or bolder color in here. Wearingeul, The Great Gatsby, was in my Sailor Pro Gear Stellar Black Hole with a medium nib. This pairing was perfect. No complaints whatsoever. I forgot how much I enjoy writing with Sailor nibs until I picked up this one for this month. It was smooth. There was still feedback even in the smoothness, and I enjoyed it so much. Just like with Van Dieman's Royal Starfish, the sheen in Wearingeul, The Great Gatsby was so very subtle that you could barely tell that it was there. But if you really look for it, you'll find it. So it's kind of like this golden sheen, kind of warmed up and deepened, almost berry colored purple. And I really enjoyed it. I kind of feel like I would want to have a cooler tone purple and a warmer purple, or a neutral. I guess this is more of a neutral purple. But I feel like I would want this purple as well as something like this or this to enjoy with whatever pen that I use. But with this one, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed writing with the ink that contrasted with the actual fountain pen. And so I think that in the future, I'm not going to shy away from exploring other pen and ink combinations that may not be exactly the same color. So if I have a blue ink, I might not have to put it in a blue pen. I can put it in another fountain pen. I can put it in this pen. I can put it in something else. And so this combination has freed me from believing that the ink has to be exactly the same color as the fountain pen. This one broke my heart, man. You broke my heart. This ink, this ink breaks my heart. It is quite nice. It is nice to write with, even though it might be a little bit dry, you know. Okay, so let me start this over. This is the Franklin-Christoph. This is the Franklin-Christoph Model 3 with a fine sig nib. It is inked up with Dominant Industry Les Nuages. This is a beautiful cloudy grayish blue color, and I really like the color, and I cannot seem to show the shimmer of this ink. There is shimmer on this card, but it refuses to reflect light separately from the paper. So there is shimmer, but it refuses. And that's what I did. I made a swatch of Les Nuages twice. So this is a swatch that I created when I received the ink flight for the month of July. And I also made another swatch because just in case, you know, things went wrong with the first swatch, I made another swatch when I received my Venice Pens order. So I had a sample of Les Nuages from Venice Pens coming before I knew that there would be a sample in my ink flight for July. So I swatched both of them because this one didn't show shimmer, but there actually is shimmer. So if I look at this so very carefully, there is a very, very subtle, like so subtle. It is so subtle that you'll probably think that I'm seeing things. Like I'm trying to see it. I'm trying my best to see it. But there is a shimmer on this card that refuses to show in direct light. For some reason, the shimmer on this card, as well as for this next ink, Dominant Industry Horizon, these two inks they have just refused to reflect light the way other shimmery inks do. Because of that, I am a little disappointed with this ink. I was expecting to see something that was a bit more here. I was expecting to see a shimmer that would show up like this, but it did not. There is shimmer here, but it is hiding. It is not living its best life. It wrote and performed very well. I do like the color of the blue, but I would not purchase a shimmery ink just to have this blue ink. Dominant Industry Horizon is beautiful, and the shimmer particles are so fine. I was bold enough to put it in my Sailor Pro Gear Slim Mini. So this is a very lovely fountain pen, and another reason why I inked up this with a shimmer ink was because it is a broad nib. I would give it the best opportunity with a broad Sailor nib. So there was so much shading. I really did enjoy the shading of this ink, but just like with Les Nuages, the shimmer particles here are almost embedding themselves in the paper so much that it is difficult to see the shimmer at all. And it's almost the same here. It's like I cannot get the light to catch the shimmer particles on this paper. I can only see the shimmer if I do not have direct lighting on it. So this was another miss for me. So I emptied this fountain pen. It performed well. It wasn't too dry. It was a nice combination with this fountain pen. It's just that if I want something that's this color, then I would just get a regular shading fountain pen ink. Let's put these fountain pens in order from my favorites to the ones that are not my favorites. Surprisingly, this was my favorite. So the Sailor was my favorite combination. I love the fountain pen. I love the feel of the nib on the paper. I loved the ink color and how it shaded so beautifully, especially with just the hint of that sheen that didn't really look like sheen at all. It was just, everything was perfect with this fountain pen. And next up was the SCHON Design Pocket 6. I love the nib, this perspective nib, and I want to get another perspective nib sometime in the future just to put it on something else. I love writing with this pen. Is this right? No. Where is this one? Leonardo was last. What? All right, so after this one is the TWSBI Eco with the Colorverse Iris Nebula. Just the most beautiful shimmer ink that I have encountered so far. So no complaints. Absolutely no complaints. This was just as great. Like, I had such a difficult time trying to rank these top 4 fountain pens. These were the 4 that stayed ink throughout the entire month. I made the difficult decision to empty all of these other ones. Like these right here, actually these, but specifically these were so difficult for me to empty. But I had to ask myself the additional question, like, would I consider purchasing a full bottle of this ink based on my experiences? And unfortunately, the answer was no. It might have been a maybe for Diamine Celebration, but not really, not exactly. I don't think I was in love with the inks. But the writing experiences that I've had with these 3 fountain pens were really positive. They were really good. But for these, I would absolutely consider, I've already bought this ink, but I would absolutely consider buying all 3 of these fountain pen inks because of how they performed and because of the colors that they were. I love that red. I love that red. And I love both of these purples. Like, can you have too many purples? Amanda B would probably say no, you can't have too many purples. So, so yeah, these were absolute favorites. So first place, second, third, fourth, fifth, still a great writing experience. 6th, I was surprised that this was as high up on the list as it was because of the color, but I eventually began to enjoy the color so much that I liked it better than all of these other ones. This had a slightly smoother writing experience on paper than Diamine Celebration. Like, these were really neck and neck, but I actually enjoy the Ferris Wheel Press, the Velvet Ballet a little bit more than Diamine Celebration, even though Diamine Celebration was a great fountain pen ink. This one was good. I would prefer something that was a little bit wetter. So a high sheening ink may not be the best for my Pilot Vanishing Point, but I am having so much fun using colorful inks in this fountain pen. This was a great shading ink, but once again, I was underwhelmed by the shimmer. Same here. It was pretty good, a little bit drier than my other writing experiences, but it was still a reliable writing experience. I was just very frustrated and very disappointed. And for here, the Leonardo Momento Magico inked up with Teranishi Opera Rose. I just did not enjoy it. And that's it. So these are all of my thoughts on my July 2023 fountain pen and ink pairings. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share about any of these inks and any of these pens, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about how your month went with your fountain pens. Were there some pen and ink pairings that you really enjoyed or some that you surprisingly did not enjoy? I'd like to hear from you. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.